Yeah,
So
we could probably assume that the rest of them might join us or might not be able to join us. Yeah.
right, it could be difficulty with teams too. I've experienced that too, where um, like I had meetings with my family on Teams, and it was just they had to download the app, and my
Yeah.
dad is not really technically inclined, and even though that was his job before he retired, he still does not know how to do it. He's forgotten everything. So yeah, let's get into it, and people join. They can join us in progress. We're still looking for the leash. Well, I can't give you what I don't have. Okay, so this is the welcome everybody to the giant kelp restoration project in Monterey. I'm gonna. I have a few things I'd like to discuss today, and they should be the next on my screen. There we go. So I think what we're going to do today is we'll go through the PowerPoint slides. There's 87 of them, and that's going to take about an hour. And then we'll have a question and answer period at the end of that, maybe about 30 minutes, and that'll be the end of our session for today. The other things you'll need is a fishing license, and you can get them online. It takes a little bit of uh, navigating through the thing, and you have to input your information. There's a little bit of confusion about the licenses. There's a GO number that you can get with your fishing license, and the GO number is kind of your number as a California fishing license holder, and it's constant for you. So if you have had a license in the past, like for abalone or something, it's the same GO number. And you'll just add on a new annual license for fishing. It costs $52.66. I'm just going to go over that. But register for the g2kr.com. It takes about 3 minutes. It's through an online portal. And then we have an online quiz. Take you about 10 minutes to get through the quiz. And the quiz is basically on the PowerPoint slides. And then we have a waiver um, that I'll send to you. You can download it. Just take a picture of it, or you can scan it if you want to get tricky about it. Send me that waiver, and then we'll plan a dive. And we'll whenever whenever your schedule's like, you're out there on a weekend or whatever, and I'll join you. And I just want to dive with you and make sure everything's cool. And that'll just take. Let's do the one dive. So, and that's kind of it. And then you'll be certified for well, not certified, but you'll be in the program, and you'll be able to be an effective member of the team here in culling urchins out here at Tankers Reef. So what this class is going to teach you is this is the regular PowerPoint slides, and it's why this is important, why how kelp forests became urchin barrens. Talk about sea urchin behavior, their anatomy, and what the kinds of urchins are that we're going after on the site. And then what happens during an urchin culling dive. We'll describe what that looks like and how to be effective and conservation minded urchin culling and why that's important too. And the Tankers Reef orientation, we have all this wayfinding that needs to be explained, how it's situated out there. And then we'll talk about your dive and how you are going to conduct it, about collecting your data and reporting your data through a data portal, and how about marine mammal disturbances and invasive species and how to identify those things and how to report those things, and how to dive on these other buoys, the orange and gray buoys, and some references at the end, and tips for being safe, of course. So prerequisites, open water, you guys already have that. 20 dives in Monterey. This is like the minimum requirement. So basically, there's the class, and there's reef check divers already have an eco diver card, so they are already qualified for this kind of activity. We just gave them an update for this kind of activity, an hour and a half course for the reef check divers, so they could do it. Now, you guys are GUE fundamentals. You guys already are qualified to do this. We just need to show this portion of the class to you so you know what to do um, on this particular dive. But for everybody else that is just like an open water person, they have to go through a PADI or NAUI certification to be able to work on the project. And basically, it's this course Plus, there's a part that's taught by the PADI or NAUI instructor about safety and that sort of thing. And then they have to do 2 dives with the instructor out on the site. So, but different folks for different strokes for different folks, right? I think that's how it goes. So, yeah, I think everyone's probably skilled with boat entry and exits in this group, and you can use a compass. And if you have any doubts, get supplementary training. Knowledge objectives: know which are native and invasive species that threaten kelp. Be able to identify the ones relevant to this activity. Know how to cull urchins while minimizing the impact on the surrounding marine life. That's a big emphasis of this training program, is not causing other damage. And to know what data you're expected to collect and how to record and report it through the data portal. And recognize these plants that are native and animal species in order to avoid harming them. I think we kind of said that already. But how to carry your hammer, I think that's become a big thing with trying to take your hammer and tuck it up in a way that doesn't drag on the bottom, doesn't hurt yourself or swing it around and hurt other people that you're diving with, and don't damage other things too. And if you're entering from shore, maybe you want to be careful with that in a big wave, and don't land on a hammer that has a pointy end on it. Things like that. Be able to recognize these marine invasive species. And the diving skills objectives are planning, organizing safe kelp restoration dives. And you guys, I'm sure you can all do that. Be able to identify and navigate to the location where the kelp restoration is being done. So we have all these navigation buoys that are out there on the water that you can just cruise up to, either on a boat or by your scooter or whatever you want to do. And it shows you the way to get to where the work is being done. And that's by the marker buoys. And we have underwater cables and lines to direct you where to go. They're all labeled. And buoyancy control is the big thing. You guys already have that, but a lot of people have difficulty with their trim and for not putting their knees on the urchins and their fins on the urchins and on everything else down there. So we're trying to get people to stay off the bottom, which is, for wreck divers, that's a real challenge to do that. So cull the urchins with a hammer and don't kill everything else that's around it. We want to make sure that we don't kill one thing, and try to kill an urchin, and then there's something behind it, or there's something else that's there. I've smashed an urchin, and then behind it was a black-eyed goby, and it just came out belly up when I did that. The spikes hit the other animal. So you just got to be careful about that part and be safe, right? That's number one goal in all this, is that, I initially saw what was going on the North Coast and the way that they were conducting their dives up there, and it just seemed like a real dangerous activity. People were just learning how to dive and were coming out, and they were landing on the rocks and getting the lifeguards are pulling them off, and it just became a kind of a disaster. And it became a lesson learned that we need to be able to do this in a safe way, even though divers can do it, and everyone thinks they can do it, but it has to be done in a safe way. And that's the number one goal in all of this. And then we have the data portal too, and we'll show you how to use that. And it talks about the culling location, and so for counting urchins, it's like the reef check divers and people that are like science divers, they like to count things. I like to count things too, but counting urchins is kind of a pain. It's kind of like you'd rather just smash them and not really have to count them, because it's just like, it's just more things to keep track of mentally. You just want to kind of enjoy it and take care of your buddy and stuff, and not be counting as you go. And counting 2 things with 2 different urchins is even harder. And then you have to keep track of it on tally. But some people will do that, and that's good, because those people that do it, we can use their information to act as a subsample for everybody else. So if you're worried about counting urchins, don't, because you're not going to have to. All we want you to do is, you were down there for so long smashing urchins, and then we'll just figure out what that means in terms of how many urchins someone normally culls in a minute. Right, we'll just calculate it that way. So why is this important, right? So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys have all heard this already, that the kelp forests are just really in decline right now. And in a kelp forest, there's 1,000 species of different life is in a kelp forest, and including fish and sea otters and all these other animals that are in there. And this is really a biodiversity crisis when the urchins have come up and eaten all their food, and this kelp forest goes away, right? And it's a kelp forest hosts the most diverse biological communities in California. That's track. And this is a little video. I don't know if you can see this video that was made by Ian Markham here. It looks really clear on my screen, but I don't know how it's coming across. It might be kind of chunky on yours. Um, and then this is an urchin population explosion. And it started in 2014 and 2016. We have a lot of marine heat. The warm water blob just sat off the coast and just heated us up. And the kelp did very poorly. The kelp likes really cold water, and it wasn't cold. And the urchins didn't seem to mind it. Urchins can survive up to 75-degree water. And so they did really well in all this, and their numbers went up 500 times what they were before. And we lost the sea stars in that marine heat wave. There were all these large Pycnopodia, the sunflower star. It was a big urchin predator, and they were gone along with 22 other species that were devastated by the marine heat and by that sea star wasting disease that was kind of happened all at once on the entire north coast during the heat wave. And so we're still recovering for that. The sea star wasting disease is still present. We still see sea stars that are turning to GUE. So we have a loss of predators is another factor in this. And a lot of the parts of Monterey look like this, right? So does anyone know where this was filmed? Where do you think this was filmed in Monterey?
Coral Street.
Coral Street? That's a good answer. Not the right answer, but that's a good answer. That was Point Lobos. That's Middle Reef at Point Lobos.
I
Yeah.
was going to say that looks like the back part of Middle Reef. Tolga and I saw that a couple weeks ago. Just tons of urchins.
There's tons of urchins on that big plateau over there at Middle Reef, and it goes down to like 55 feet and then really becomes urchins down there and goes all the way around to Bluefish Cove. And Cannery Row Wall is just destroyed by urchins, and it breaks your heart to see it, to go like that when and kelp becomes like this, the kelp just doesn't have a chance. They get onto that holdfast and they just burrow in and undermine the holdfast, and then the whole thing ends up on the shore. So our state and federal agencies are monitoring our activities. So this is an exception to recreational fishing rules, but the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the California Ocean Protection Council, both are state agencies, and Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary / NOAA are that's the federal agency, and they're monitoring what we're doing. So they've gone out there and they've done all their surveying ahead of time. They've counted all the urchins and all the kelp on our site, and they're going to be watching if we cause other disturbances to the environment. They're actually going to they already done it. They went and took pictures of certain spots. I don't know where they are. But there's a grid and stuff, and they take a picture, and then they'll come back later on and take another picture, and then they'll compare the two images to see, oh, well, a diver might have done this kind of thing. So we really have to be very overly careful in doing this, that we don't because we're really being watched, and the success of the project is not up to me, it's up to them in determining whether we're successful in doing this or not. So success means removing the urchins without impacting the other life. So that's very true. About an urchin, right? So urchins have 5-part radial symmetry. Like you can see in this diagram here, how an urchin has like these 5 sections. So they're in the same family as sea stars, right? They will also have the 5-part radial symmetry. It's like, I don't know, you call it spokes on a wheel, but Some sea stars have 6 and 7 sometimes, but urchins are all this 5-part thing. So they're in the same family as sea stars, as sand dollars. Brittle stars are in that same family. Sea cucumbers are also in that same family as well. And this is what an urchin looks like on the inside, right? So it has these, the the reproductive organs, the gonads that are inside of it, and that is like its fatty tissues, right? So as the urchin is brought along, it is on the reef. If it's eating a lot of kelp, it'll be healthy like that, right? But if the urchins are deprived of the resource of algae, they will like consume their own gonad to stay alive, right? And let me go back. So this is what it looks like on the inside of an urchin, right? And so when you smash them, you want to try and damage it so much that it can't like reproduce, right? Like, and you'll see that the urchins out there don't have full gonads because they've exhausted their food resource for the most part, and so the gonad is very minimal. But you don't want to like give it a single hole in it, because then like its last dying gasp is going to be to try and spawn, right? So you want to make sure and like really damage it so that it's not going to have that chance. Even though without much gonad, it's not much potential, but there's enough of them, right, that they might do something. So urchin spines, right? Urchins have these spines on them, and that's their defense from the predators. Is these spines, and when they're walking out on the sand, they actually lower their spines and put their little. They have these little tube. Well, it's saying here that they're pretty sharp, and here they're like a pencil point. Okay, I mean you can pick them up with your hands, and they're not gonna with your bare hands. They're not gonna pierce your hands. But if you really hit it hard, it'll go through your skin, and then it has like the spine will like embed itself in your skin, and when you pull it out, like pieces of it'll break off inside. So um, you and there you see people that have urchins, like they've been poked by urchins, and then like weeks later they still have evidence of it in them. So don't try to get it. I've hit them hard enough with my fins to actually have spines that pierce my fins, right? So they're kind of durable. So you just kind of want to be careful of that, and don't be careless with them. Kind of be like, you can grab them with but don't impact them. Don't hit them with your hand or something. And it says here, you can see this article. I should probably look at that article. I don't know what it says. And then urchin tube feet, right? So in addition to all the spines, they have like starfish have these little tube feet, and they can kind of smell with these little tube feet. They're little suction cups on them. And that's what makes them stick to the reef, is these little suction cup feet, and they walk around that way, and that's how they move in different directions. They kind of smell other things. You can see the pedal area. That's the ones on top. That's the little tubes that go out, and they're really long. They're actually twice as long as the spines, and they're going out and they're trying to like sense things in their environment, and they can sense each other, and they can smell where food is, and are attracted to it that way. And the other thing they like to do is they put things on top of their heads, right? They're kind of like, they find a shell or a big rock or something, and they just like put it on top, and then it makes them feel like they're safe or something, that. And it kind of works, because when you're kind of scanning, you don't really notice that there's an urchin there, because it's hiding in plain sight by this camouflage that it's picked up. I was going through on the reef, and there was one. The rock was very lightweight, because it doesn't weigh much, but it was probably a big rock, like 6 inches high, like that. And this little urchin was supporting it. He was like going around with this big rock on top, and I just went over there and just picked it up and went boom. that was the end of that. But yeah, you need to kind of look past that camouflage and find them underneath it. And so generally the urchins have changed their behavior, because before we had one purple urchin, and for every 25 square meters, right? They were hiding in cracks. They were way out of the way. But then when you get to a certain number of them, and there's no longer drift algae that comes in to feed them, then they have to come out of their cracks and eat and openly graze on the surface for other things. And the otters really won't eat the urchins. Everyone likes to think that, oh well, that's part of the solution is the otters, but otters will help to maintain a kelp forest that has healthy urchins in them, but they will not eat the urchins in the barren. They're clever. They figured that those things have no value because there's no gonad in them, and they won't bother with them. They might give it to a pup to play with, but the mothers aren't going to bother with them. And the otter needs to eat a lot of them because they have to eat 25% of their body weight every day. And so they just kind of roam in the ocean, roam in the open, and they're devouring kelp wherever they find it. And they create these urchin barrens. And so when you get an urchin barren, they've eaten all the kelp, and they kind of eat like in a certain order, right? Like a goat will do that too. It'll eat these things and those things and those things. So they eat the brown algae first, then they eat the red algae next, and then they go on to eating the crustose coralline algae. That's that pink bubblegum stuff that's all over the rocks, and the red encrusting algae. They eat those last. So what ends up happening is you see like the urchin barrens the way they are, where it's just like a purple spotted and with the pink moonscape, right? With all the purple urchins on it. That's kind of how it ends up. So this is what a healthy urchin would look like on the inside. You've seen this picture before, and this is from a healthy kelp forest. So it's full of that gonad, but this is when it's starving on the reef is what it looks like, right? So this urchin hasn't been eaten for a while, and you can see the gonad is all gone on the urchin. And what you see is just the remainder, the other tissues inside of it when you cut it open. This is the mouth of the urchin. They call it Aristotle's lantern. It's an odd name for it, but it has these 5 jaws that kind of meet in one thing. They're self-sharpening. It's kind of neat. And they're just devoid of any gonad inside of them, and that's to varying degrees. And also, it's a good point, is that they can live in this starving state for years. You're not going to outlast them by starving them. Once they've exhausted their resource, they'll just sit there and wait for more kelp to form in the spring, and they'll eat that. They can live without eating for years. They can actually eat by dissolved solids that are from the ocean. So, there's been urchin barrens have lasted for 50, 70 years. Can go for a long time. So there's 2 kinds of urchins that are in this range, and we have permission to cull both of them. Where is it? So purple urchins, right? That's the Strongylocentrus franciscanus, and they are kind of a light lavender. This is kind of a bluish color in this picture, but they're kind of a lavender color is kind of my impression of it. The dark purple. They're usually in really high numbers. They're sometimes there's so many of them that they're touching each other. They're on top of each other as they come together, and they aggregate. And the other one is the red urchin, Mesocentrus franciscanus, and red urchins come in different colors. Red urchins can be like kind of a pink color, and they can be like a black color, right? Color is not a really good indicator for the red urchins. They have a red body, but basically it has a huge range of colors. So it could be a very pale pink to a very dark, a black is their color. But you can see the difference is the length of the spines. Their spines are about the same length as the size of their body, right? That's a good way to know the two between the 2 species. But you don't have to really discern them too much because like we have permission to kill both. So the body is always red. So if you put a light on them, you can see that it's red, but it's maybe a dark red. And some of them have lived for, they did a carbon dating. One was like 240 years old. Yeah, they go a really long time. There's I was diving at Half Moon Bay, which is kind of a weird place because there's no otters there, and it's illegal to harvest abalone and urchins there. And the urchins were the size of basketballs. They were so huge. They were just like, I was just amazed at how big the red urchins were there. And it comes in different ways. Sometimes you'll see all purples. Sometimes you go to a place and it's all reds. It really kind of varies quite a bit. Usually there's more purples and reds. Our ratio was about 7 to 1. Some places are 2 to 1. It just kind of varies, and it depends on lots of factors, including if there's a red urchin fishery that is active and harvesting just one species or the other. So the goal is to preserve biodiversity. So if an urchin's sitting there on the bare rock, like in this picture right here, so you want to try and preserve it by, if it's over the bare rock or sand, with encrusting pink or red algae, then you just go ahead and get it where it is, right there on this part. So this is the hammer that we're using for the project. It looks like, here's what one looks like here. So I have one. You can see like a life size with me in the picture, right? So it's basically a welding hammer, right? This is what you use for if you were doing some welding and you wanted to knock the slag off it, you kind of like hit it with this, and that way your hand won't get hot from all the hot metal you're hitting. And but this spring is useful too because it kind of gives your arm some relief, from getting, because you're hitting rocks, and you're kind of bang, 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 and you do that for an hour, and your arm gets pretty tired. And switch to right to left kind of thing as I go along. So call the urchins only over the bare rock or the rock coated with the pink or encrusting red algae. So that's the hammer, the pointed end and a chisel end. Sometimes I think what we've discovered is that, like, if you try to use a hammer that is like a flat, like it has like a ball peen hammer or something, like a regular claw hammer that you might have at home. When you hit it, there's a pressure wave that's right in front of the face of the hammer, and as you go to hit it, the urchin will just squirt out of the way as you go to hit it. So you really want to have a chiseled end or a pointy end. And like I find that for like a small urchin, like urchin can be like that big, then I use a little guy. And there's like on Tanker's Reef, you'll see there's a lot of the urchins live in these little holes. Over time, they have burrowed themselves into holes on the rock, and this tool works just good for that. You just go pop them in there. If they're bigger and they're in a big hole, sometimes they're in a large, like a little pocket, and the urchins have ground their way back and forth over the years, and then a new one comes in that place. But then you just use the chisel and you just get it, and I kind of like rip them, I kind of like hit it and pull it out. After 1,000. This is an example of it right here of this video of what that looks like underwater for smashing an urchin. So you just get it here and just hit it with the hammer with the chisel, break it in half like that. That seems like a lot of hits, but that's kind of the idea. So effective urchin calling. So you want to crush it so it can't reproduce, right? It's basically the premise of it. So if you make a single hole in the top of the shell, it's not enough. It needs to be something larger than that. That is, you've really damaged the urchin, because if you just put a single hole in it, it's still going to live for a few days. I'd say like if you make a hole that like a 1-inch hole in the top of it, or like a hole like that, it's probably going to live for a few days, and it'll crawl around, whatever. It might decide to, if it can, it's going to try to reproduce with its last gasp at that point. So you want to break it up. So this is what it's like when you break up an urchin like that. You make a big hole in the top, and you've really done some damage to it, and it's not going to live very long after that, but it'll still move. I didn't realize how long it takes for them to die. They're such durable and incredible creatures that even in this state, it'll probably move a couple inches and then not move anymore and live for like 3 days in that state. I've actually cut them in half, and both halves will live for about a day and a half. So pretty incredible creatures, and we want to try and put them out of their misery. And there's 5 parts to them, so you want to try to break it up and damage all the parts. But yeah, let's just try it like that. And you don't need to squeeze it. If you squeeze it, then you're going to hurt your fingers. But sometimes they're really small, like a 1 centimeter urchin, and you can just, they're not, it's like they have shells, but the purple urchin shells are not very hard. You can just they're kind of brittle, like an egg or something. The red urchins they're thicker shells. They're more durable. Especially a big red urchin. I mean, your hammer will bounce off them. They're pretty tough. I'm over here. Where do I want to go? There we go. Saying small urchins take a couple taps to call them. You can always hit them a couple times. The other thing you're kind of looking for too is to um, make a big enough hit with your hammer that you know you've killed it, right? You don't want to like come back and try to hit it again because you weren't sure if you killed it already, right? So as you're calling urchins, you'll find that you try to do it in an orderly way, but it's really kind of random. You're kind of maybe I'm trying to go this way or that way, but you're kind of like getting a lot of stuff and you might miss one and you want to go back and get them. And so if you make a big enough impact in them and big hole in them, then you can tell where you've been. And then your buddy knows where you've been too, right? Because your buddy not be really paying attention and he may come over into your lane a little bit and try to smash them and they won't know because you only made a single hole in the top. It's not obvious. So you want to that's another reason why you want to make a pretty big impact on them. But you also don't want to chip the rock substrate too, and a tanker's reef, the shale is very brittle. So you'll find that right away is that if you start using your chipping hammer and you start pounding on the rock, you're just going to break off pieces of rock. It's a mudstone, basically. That whole area was a river at one point, and it's sedimentary stone and it's in layers and there's like these undercuts underneath there where there's fish in there and stuff and there's other animals in these layers and the stone is very friable, very brittle, and so you want to be aware of that and don't try to cause too much damage to that shell environment by hitting it with the hammer. But you can smash the urchin and not smash what's underneath it. And then all the culling stuff that is from the urchin, it all goes back right into the ecosystem and it's consumed by fish and other like black-eyed goby. As you're doing it, you'll see black-eyed gobies come up. You'll see those little sand dabs will come up on the rocks and they'll start eating it. You'll see fish coming in from all over. And we did this experiment in Pacific Grove and our fish biomass increased 16 times due to our culling. It's food is what it is. None of it's wasted. And we're going to try to restore the biodiversity that was lost when they took over the reef. There's about 7 urchins per square meter on this reef right now, or historically there was 0.04. So that's a huge increase, and we want to lower that down quite a bit. So these urchins are on a rock with only encrusting algae. They can call them right where they are, right? That's an easy one right there. They're in the open. I'm not sure where this was taken. Here's some red urchins that are on a rock with the purple, with the bubblegum encrusting coralline algae, and there's also a red algae there. That's the red encrusting algae. It's like a film on the rock, and so you're really not going to damage that. So you can just get them right where they are. And in this note, there are dark, light, and red urchins. So there's a pink ones here. You can kind of see a variety. There's a pink one here. There's a real dark one here in this picture. And here's a couple of purples in here as well. But that's kind of the color range is well represented in this picture. And you can see these here. These ones are on the sand. So if urchin's on the sand, just go ahead and get it right there where it is. And that way nothing will get damaged. But it's kind of difficult. It's better. To me, it's easier to have a hard background than a soft. When you're trying to smash something, sand kind of absorbs the impact rather than the rock. The rock is better for it, but you can get them on the sand as well. And so if the urchin's in a crack, these aren't in very deep cracks, but I think it kind of makes the point that if an urchin is way down in a crack, it's a happy urchin, right? It's getting its kelp. It's getting it without going out and openly grazing and looking for more. You can leave it alone, right? And not have to go in there and get it. If this seems a little shallow, I might just take my hammer and kind of pop it out of the hole and smash it on the side a little bit. But if it's deep in a crack, if you start swinging your hammer in there, you're going to kill everything in that crack, right? So there's not any real point in digging deep for urchins. You just leave them where they are, and then if they come out and exhibit bad behavior, then another group of divers can get them on a second pass, right? We're going to go over the same area several times, so the idea is not to damage the wildlife. This is kind of a good example of what it's like out there at Tankers Reef. There's all these layers, right? With sedimentary layers with interstitial like sands. Like it was like it built up over the years, and then it was sand, and then it built up over the years, and then it becomes like these layers, these lifts, And sometimes the lifts are 4 feet high. I'm sure you've all been to Shale Island and seen what that's like. It's the same kind of environment as Shale Island, where you have these little shelves in there full of nudibranchs that are down in those holes. So you're kind of when you're the urchins like those spots. That's a good place for them to kind of hide and hunker down. And so you'll see them out. You see them a lot of times in these little holes. So you want to be able to kill them in these little cracks, but not kill everything else around them. Kill all the Coriolanactis and the sponges and everything else that are around this area. So if it's deep under a ledge, yeah, we really don't want anyone like crawling under the ledge and trying to get them deep in there. Take off your tank and go deep. Just leave them if they're deep, and that's fine. I find like purples are on top, kind of. They're like in about like March, I would say. No, I guess it was April. All the purples just decided it was time, and they all came out of the cracks and started running over the reef. They just like it's spring, and so the purples are out on top and on top of the reef a lot of times, or in the cracks. But the reds, the big red urchins, are like deep underneath these cracks. They have different behaviors. The red urchins are more mobile. They're bigger. They go faster. They have to eat in order to live. They can starve to death. The purple urchins will not, right? But a red urchin will also eat a lot more than a purple urchin, much more detrimental to kelp growth than a purple urchin. But there's less of them too. There was only 5% red on the reef, right? Just give you some idea of the balance of purples and reds. So if you can't see the hammer tip, probably means you shouldn't be swinging a hammer at it, right? So you want to be able to see all the way in there what you're looking at. Don't like blindly, try to be, calling it's over here somewhere. I can't see on the other side of that ledge, so I'm just gonna try and maybe it's there somewhere. You don't want to do that. You want to come over here and, oh, okay, I'm getting it. Getting all those urchins on those cracks. That's the technique. And I told you that. Well, you know what? I need the keyboard. I do. Okay, there we go. We'll get the urchins out without damaging other marine life eventually. So not to worry. We're going to do several passes on these areas. It's not like you paint a wall with one brush stroke, right? It's going to take a little bit. So some of the ones that are underneath, we'll leave those urchins alone. It says over here. And these ones here probably be moved out of the way and then smashed in another spot. So these ones here are close to a fish eating anemone. So move these out of the way before you smash these so we don't damage the anemone in this situation. And then this is about neutral buoyancy and body position. So this diver here is doing pretty good, staying up off the bottom. Fins are up, and the only thing touching the reef is the hammer and a hand for grabbing urchins. Sometimes I'll put a knife in my other hand and pop them out of little spots and get them with the other one. But that's the good body position, kind of trimmed out like that, which you guys do all the time anyways, not like us. We're like, it's different, like this is okay. You should have your gauges up. You should have everything up on top of you, not dragging stuff on the bottom, not hooking, not scratching your gauges and stuff, which for me is kind of difficult because I go a lot closer to the bottom than most people are comfortable with because I'm doing reef check, right? Like reef check divers are like crawling around on the reef. We're like, take all the air out of my BC. I'm just going to crawl around and do my stuff. But we have to kind of not do that now because there's full of urchins. We don't want to cause all this bycatch. So somewhere you have to be between not the usual 5 feet off the bottom where we're cruising along and get down closer to where you're within arm's distance of the reef. And this is how you wouldn't do it. This is how when you're on, you just take all the air out, like I was just saying, and you're like down on the reef and your knees are on the reef, and you're gonna probably pop your dry suit doing something like that. Dry suits are an have infinite points of failure. I've been diving with the wetsuit for all my urchin diving just for that reason, because it's like I just can't deal with all the. I'm gonna get spikes and spines in all of my gear. So. You guys. So here's a camouflage crab, right? That's on something here. And so there's little critters, this is kind of a pointing out about the biodiversity of what's in the kelp forest and even in these places. And this was shot out at Tanker's Reef, and these things are there. So we're trying to protect these creatures like this. There's all these shale boring clams out there too. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this site, but there's been over the years, these clams have come and they bore their shells deep into the rock, and this is the surface. You'll see there's an in-current and an ex-current opening, siphons here, and
I've been trying to
those are
figure out what those are for weeks. I saw one there and I could not figure out what it was.
yeah, they're really bizarre looking, and there's actually a couple different species there, but that goes down into the rock about a foot. It goes way down
Wow.
inside of it, and then
I
when
thought it was
they
some
are,
kind of giant tunicate.
yeah, it's kind of like a tunicate, right? Because tunicates have the two openings too, but they're clams. And when the clam dies off, you'll find fish in those holes. We've been finding a lot of fringe heads, sarcastic fringe heads, particular, which is kind of I see them around the wharf a lot, but there are a lot of them out here, and they live in those holes. So if you see a good hole, put a light in there, you might see a fish looking back at you. Here's a couple of Doras, well, 3 Doras. It's like a orgy, and they're laying eggs, right? So we want to avoid damaging those nudibranch eggs. This place is really rich with nudibranchs too, lots of different kinds. We get San Diego Doras. We see the shaggy mouse out here, which is actually kind of cool looking. It has like little hairs on it. It looks like a little mouse. You'll see them. They're cool. It's like a little worm here, some annelid. Here's some sponges. Here's a leafy hornmouth. This is bryozoan. There's all kinds of life down here that we want to really be sensitive of. Here's the little sculpins too. It seems like in all of the urchin bearing stuff, it seems like a rise of sculpins, and I don't really know if that's true or not, but I certainly see them a lot more. They're a lot more because maybe there's less places for them to hide. That you'll see a lot more sculpins out on the site jumping. You don't really see them because they're so camouflaged, but they jump from place to place, and that's when you'll see them. And the yellow spot fringe head is like that too. Like once you start culling them, they'll all come out. They'll come to see what you're doing and try to eat the food. So be really aware of that there's going to be some critters jumping around while you're doing this work. So here's a picture of smashing urchins. It's not really close in the picture, but what you can see is this is all colonial sand tube worms right here. These are all worms, right? Worm casings in these shells. So if you're just smashing them on top of this colonial sand tube worm, you're going to damage the colonial sand tube worm by doing that. In this case, you want to pick it up and put it on some rock or something and smash it over there. So okay, that's it for anatomy and everything else. Good. So this is Tanker's Reef. So Tanker's Reef is this area that is, as you come into Monterey, normally you come in on Highway 1 and you get off here at, this is Del Monte right here. So there's that long off ramp. And then you come down into town, this is Casa Verde, Aquarius Dive Shop's over here. And then you keep coming down, you go through the Navy area, eucalyptus trees. And then there's some condos over here. There's a parking lot right here at Park Avenue. And then you keep coming down and you'll see there's all the grassy area. They call it Window on the Bay sometime. There'll be protesters out there different times standing in the parking lot. And then there's another parking lot here. It says it's like Del Monte parking lot, I think is what it's called. And the Monterey Bay Kayaks is right next to it. I'm sure you recognize that. And then you would keep coming in, and then there's the municipal wharf right here, municipal marina, the wharf number 2. I think Josh and Nick started from here and went this way down the coast. They were able to start at this point.
Yeah, we started
but-
right by Wharf 2 and scooted over from there. But
right
yeah, I
here,
think
yeah.
yeah, it probably would have been better to park closer to Tanker Reef and
Yeah, you park here or here is closest.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll show you more about these spots here. There's another one over here at Casa Verde Way, but that's kind of even farther to get to the site. This red line here is the boundary that's established by Fish and Wildlife in the regulations. So we're only allowed to cull urchins in this one place, right? Not on the MPAs, not at San Carlos Beach. It all has to be done right inside this Tankers Reef project area. And like I said, you look at just looking at the bathymetry, you can see that this is all shale in here. This is all like this substrate that is like from this used to be like this little lake over here at the Navy that used to reach the ocean before. And it formed like a little channel right here. There's a sand channel right through the middle of this site that divides it in half, right? I'm going to show you a little more. So as a shale reef, this is granite over here, right? So shale, granite. And we want to be able to, in the future, go to granite, right? Like this is not the best site for doing kelp restoration because like, sometimes there's kelp there, sometimes there's not. And so, but that stone too, by its nature of being mudstone, it's like ablative, right? Like layers are always coming off. It's always sloughing off material as it sits there. So it's hard for kelp to really stick to that thing if it's always, you know, slippery and moving off its own stuff. So granite structures are much more harder and more and better for kelp. And I think that's why here at Tankers, some years we have kelp, sometimes we don't, but we always had kelp at the granite structures at the breakwater in San Carlos. So I'll talk more about that later. So okay. So this area right here is the cable grid, and I'll talk more about the cable grid. So that's kind of where it's located. It's about 700 feet from shore. It's kind of in the middle of our treatment area. Our treatment area is going to be this half of the reef, and this area is the control area, right? So we're not going to call anything on this side of the sand channel. And what they did, our agency partners, is they came over here and counted everything on the cable grid. They counted all the urchins and the kelp in this spot. And then they also picked a random spot over here in the control area and did the same thing, counted everything, right? So we have a little bit, they're not exactly the same, it's not exactly parity, but we want to make sure that we only call on this side so we can see the effects. We don't want anyone to call over there because that would just not be helpful to do that, because then it would be like, wow, they both got kelp. Well, they shouldn't have, but somebody went over there and killed all the urchins in the control. So we're definitely concentrating in this area on this side of the reef. Also, too, about these areas, this is where the restrooms are. So there's restrooms here at the wharf. Also at Casa Verde, they have porta potties they set up over there. Okay. Act as a quality control. Okay, talked about that. So this is what the grid looks like, right? So it's basically bolted to the bottom. There are these like 5-inch long stainless steel bolts that are epoxied into that shale bed, and on them they have the whole thing is pretty flat, right? So this sends 27 feet and this sends 32 feet, right? Give you kind of a lay of the land. This is a leaded line, and so is the one on the south side. It's basically a polypropylene line. It has little lead pellets inside of it, and on that line there's little tags, right, that tell you what lane you're in. So basically, it establishes 20 of these 5-meter wide lanes that go in the north-south direction, and the tapes are going to start at the 0 mark and go to 100. Right. So what I mean by that is that in this drawing, this outside line out here is actually a clothesline That's like a plastic coated clothesline. It's been tied together on bolts. And then this orange line right here is actually like a cave line, like you'd use for if you were diving in a cave, right? It's like a string and it's bolted to the bottom too. So between the clothesline and the cave line is 10 meters, right? 10 meters is about 30 feet, a little more than 30 feet wide, right? And then in the middle of that lane, right, between the A point and the other A point is a 100-meter tape measure. 100 meters is 330 feet, right? It's a long ways, right? But the on the north end is where it's tied off at first, so that's 0. And then the line is pulled all the way to the other end, and it has another wire attaching it to the other tag at the end of the A over here. And those tape measures are down there right now, right? I just set them down there, and they're just gonna weather the weather, right? And hang out. And they might be even a little. This is all drawn really straight, but in reality, it's not really straight, right? It's kind of it's in the water, right? So the idea, and I'll show you how this is done, but this is kind of the lay of the land, and every corner has a yellow buoy on it. And the corners are labeled too, northwest, southwest, southeast, northeast. And it's laid on a magnetic heading, right? There's no point in going true and try to adjust it, right, for declination. We're just going to use, we're divers. We're going to go with compass. That's how it's laid out, right? So that's the grid there. And we also have a mooring ball on it. That is, this is 7 meters off the north end, right? And that's what Maxwell and Nick were dove on last weekend. They started on the white buoy, went to the bottom, came down here. I put a bunch of hammers here. I put about a half a dozen hammers sitting attached to the reef here, and that's where I met up with them. Was right at this point. And then I wandered around and killed a bunch of urchins on the kelp over here. There's also an orange buoy, right? So the orange buoy is kind of a different idea, and I'll explain more about that. But basically, it's a single buoy. It has an anchor on it and a lot of chain. It shows like a little ball, but it's actually a chain. And then it has a reel, a 100-meter reel that is going south from it, right? And that just I'll talk more about how that is. And there's a gray buoy too that does the same thing. But this is for our trained divers to use. And the gray one is for untrained divers to use. So if somebody were to casually like come to town and they're like, hey, I'm just visiting, I just want to go out and smash some merchants, I'll buy a license for the day, whatever, where can we go? And we want their data. So they can go to the gray buoy. Like if you were to come in like on the charter boat on the beach hopper on a weekend and say, we're going to go out and do this, you can go down there. There'll be some hammers at the bottom and go have a good time and smash a bunch of urchins and report your data. But it's a simpler process for them because they're not trained or anything and they don't know what to do. And so the gray buoy is going to be where it's high density urchin targets, right? Not sensitive kelp in other species environments. Like the worst areas is where we'll put the gray buoy, and we'll let them concentrate on reducing the high density urchin patches. So I just kind of explained all that. Oh, it's a 3-year project. Okay. So we want people, there's a couple ways to get there. I'm gonna explain all the ways how you can get to this site. So you can start at the dock, right? If you have your own boat or a commercial boat, you can start here, or you can start at the breakwater and come on out this way and approach the grid from the north. We want everyone to approach from the north all the time. That way, because the divers are going to be on the south side. And so if we have everybody all the boats come in from the north side, maybe we can eliminate this. We're putting divers and boats in the same place, right? We want to try and make it safe. How can we do that? Have them always come in from the north and leave to the north. And that way they won't cut all the kelp up too with their props. And all of our divers will be on the south side, either going to shore or returning back safely to a buoy. So we're telling people go from the north and moor at the white buoy. That's the one that you guys were on the other day. That's the one you can moor on. The other ones you shouldn't moor on because those are just anchors and chains there. The mooring ball has got a huge block on the bottom of it. It's not going to go anywhere. Tell everybody too, the wind comes up at 1 o'clock usually, so it's best to be all done by 1. It's best if you can get there kind of early. If you're going to do 2 dives, come at 8 and then do a second one and be be off the water by 1 probably is probably the best approach to get it out there. It starts to pick up a lot of wind chop. And here's the other way you can go. It's 0.8 miles from the breakwater to get out there by private boat. And then you could also do it by kayak too. Monterey Bay Kayaks, they rent kayaks, and you can always launch from there as well. We're trying to get a discount with them. I haven't figured that out yet. I gotta talk to them. But you can park right next to that parking lot. You can go out by kayak. It's a very short ride. The other thing I would say is that if you were out there on a kayak and the wind were to shift, and instead of blowing the usual northwest, if it changes 90 degrees and starts blowing over the peninsula, like an offshore breeze, you need to get back to shore right away, because it'll pick up sometimes, and then you won't be able to get your kayak back to shore. It'll just blow too hard, and you'll end up in Moss Landing. This is our preferred parking place right here. Is at this place that's off Park Avenue, just off of Del Monte Avenue. Is a little. This is what it looks like from a different view. So here's Park Avenue right here. It says 2-hour parking, but I don't know if that's really enforced. There's an anytime American Lock and Key is sitting over there. They've been there for a week. I don't know. No one doesn't seem to bother them. There's a Roto-Rooter parking lot that's abandoned right here, but they said they're going to take it again. I'm still trying to negotiate with them. But anyways, you can park right here, and then you just kind of walk down the rec trail a little bit, and then there's an entrance over a little slight sand dune, and then you walk down the beach a little bit, and then you go out to the grid. The orange buoy is sitting over here, so maybe you don't have to walk as far if you're going to the orange buoy, because things are going to move around. Like the orange buoy and the gray buoy are going to move around, so your distance may vary. So this is some explanation of that. Or you could just cut the angle, right? Just go at an angle. Don't do so much walking on the beach. I mean, it's hard packed sand, but you're carrying a lot of gear, so try to minimize that if you can. Walk to the beach. Yeah, it says 2-hour parking, but I don't know. No restrictions on weekends, so I guess weekends are good. So this is equipment you'll need to go out there. You need a fishing license for sure, $52.66 for a year. And you can get it at this address. I'll share all the links with you at the end. You don't have to write them down right now. Buy a hammer. It costs $8.06 for that Amazon hammer I was showing you. There's Home Depot sells it for $6.27. There's another one I found. Harbor Freight sells one for $6. And I'm gonna leave some out there on the buoys too, right? So, you can buy your own hammer and bring it with you. That way, you know for sure you're gonna have one, and you don't. At the end of your work, you don't have to return it. But if in a pinch, you can always borrow one of mine down there. Just try to return it back where you found it. I think they're all sold out. Every time I go to Home Depot, I buy all their hammers. And so I might be defeating the purpose, but you can order them online too, and they'll send it to your house. And a small slate would be good too, because you're going to need to know what your assignment is, what you're going to, so you have to write that down, and you want to note your ending position too, so you'll need to be able to write that down too. And shears or a knife is always a good idea. Bring that along. And an SMB, it's all your standard equipment. I don't think there's anything here in this kit that you don't already have. A whistle, right? I don't know if people have a whistle, but you should have a whistle, because it's a long ways out there. You're kind of on Tankers Reef, and you're a long way from help. There's people walking on the shore, but there's not a lot of divers out there, and so if you have an emergency, you want to be able to get help. So a whistle would be a good thing to have. And of course, some clips for clipping things off. So how to get a lane assignment. So you sign up for the lane assignment at this thing right here, g2krlink.com, get a lane. And when you do that, and then you view your assignment at this link right here, and it will populate your name on this in the next spot. right? So these are all like made up things, right? These registration numbers. But when you put in your name and registration number on this website, on this link here, it will give you an assignment. And then you view your assignment, you click on it here, and your name will be right here. And that will be the next assignment. So if I were to enter it right now, I would be at grid C west 0 meters is my starting point on the grid. Lane C going west. There's 2 lanes, east and west. I'll explain what those are. And that's how you do it there. So only one person from your buddy team needs to get the assignment, right? So Josh and Nick are going out. Josh can get the assignment, or Nick can get the assignment, but you both shouldn't get an assignment because only one person in your team needs to get it. But when you report data, both of you will report data. You can't report it as a buddy team. So I want to show this in this class. Okay, so I am going. Let me see how I can do it. An example for how this goes. Bear with me a second here. Okay, so this is how you get the culling assignment, right? And I'll send you I just jumped into this link. So it's all good done with Google Forms. So this is the culling assignment, and the required fields are, I don't know why there's 2 of them. So I'm going to put in Keith, and my registration number is number 1. And there's some information here about what the steps are, and I'll hit submit. And then I can go here, and here's the assignment, right? So Keith, number 1, I just did this. My next assignment is grid C west 0. And I'll tell you more what that means. And so basically get your assignment before the weekend. You're going to go out the weekend, whatever, during the week, but every Tuesday at 9 o'clock, I'm just going to clear them all off, right? Because I'm going to figure if you haven't reported I'll look at what has been done, but I'll make new assignments at that time. And if there's unfinished assignments, I'm just going to take them off, and we'll reset them. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next thing here. So what this looks like. So you start out, and from shore you see the large white buoy. You're going to swim out there, and you start at the white buoy. That's what it looks like. But now it has a flag on it. It says G2K on it. It's a 24-inch mooring ball. Sitting there, there's condos on the shore. And go to the starting point. White mooring buoy. So you can go over there, and then descend on the buoy line, and at the base you'll follow the short line to the location, and then they have tags on it. It's F, right? There's a label on it. And follow the cable to find your lane assignment. You find this lane underwater there. And each lane is 5 meters wide by 100 meters long. So if there would be a tape that runs, this doesn't show up, but there would be a tape that runs down F at this point, and you're going to be on either the east side or the west side of that tape. Between the tape and that cave line is where you're going to be. So it looks like this. Here's that tape going down. It starts at 0 and it runs down this way. And this is lane F east, right? So 2 divers go side by side. You're smashing urchins all along this area. You started at 0 and you go along as long as you can. And that was the assignment, lane F east 0. And then, so you're going to go along head south, culling urchins. Boy, so you're going to go down the line right here, culling urchins as best you can until you reach a stopping point. And so you're low on air. You've reached 70 meters. I'm done. I'm cold. Done smashing urchins. You record, write down 70 meters on your slate, and that's it. You're done. Mark a slate with 0 to 70 meters on your tape, and that's what you'll report later on. Send with the surface marker buoy. You can put an SMB and pop it and surface there, or you can go to a corner or another buoy and ascend on a buoy for safety, right? You don't really want to ascend out here in the middle because some boat might come take you. So, and this is what it looks like when you stop. It has the tape will be right there. Though some of these tapes have feet and meters on them, so it might be a little bit confusing to flip it over necessarily. If you reach the end, then you can come back the other way. So this is your say you go all the way to the end, then you would go east at that point and go to the next lane and go down there, and then you would record that you got F east to 100, and then you go to the next lane east and continue, and then you're getting low on air at 90 in the new lane, and you stop, and so you're going to record G west 90 meters, and then go to the corner and ascend, and always save enough air and go through this. So collecting and recording data. So record the time you spent calling urchins, not your total bottom time, right? So let's say you start from shore and it takes you spend 20 minutes getting out of there. Well, that didn't really count towards smashing urchins. So just count the time that you smashed the urchins, right? We want looking for a unit of effort that you spent calling urchins, not your total bottom time. And where you did it, like, so you know where you were on the grid or on the which buoy and what number you were on, and start and stop points for that. Anything else you found noteworthy, like all these things: marine mammals, invasive species, accidental damage to marine life, or trash that you find on the reef. Or if you find damage to the grid lines of the buoys, make a note of that too. There's spots in the recording data where you can enter that information, and any other comments you have. So this is how you would report your data. So log every dive at this link, or each diver will have to do that. And then I want to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to open up another one of these, and I'm just going to go back and do log your dive. Okay, so this is what this looks like. So each diver has to complete the log entry, not just the one who did the assignment. And if you're just practicing it, right? I'm just going to play around here. I'll hit a yes. So I'm just going to practice. And it's not going to save my data. It'll actually appear, but we won't save it. So my name is Keith, and my registration number is 1, and I'll just put in the date of all ones. And let's say I was on the cable grid, right? And I'll hit next. And I started at lane F, and I was on the east side, and I went began at 0, and I ended at said 70, and I also ended on the east side. Ending lane, ending lane, I'm sorry, ending lane is not that. Ending lane is F, and my ending number was 70. I did it wrong. Okay, 70. That's how you enter that. And distance traveled, this is like a check number kind of to see if it makes sense that you went from 0 to 70 and you're reporting 70, but it's just it doesn't really have a value. It doesn't really have. It'll help to clarify things if there's an error. Like if you went all the way around to G and you said you only went 20 meters, or if you told me I only went, I went 280 feet or something. Well, then maybe you're reading feet instead of meters. Maybe I could spot an error by you doing that 70. And then what happened? So time spent calling urchins. I was down there for 60 minutes, and this is optional. You don't have to count urchins. I'm just going to say 60 minutes. I didn't count any urchins. And then any comments, I'm going to say I have comments. And then my comments are going to be a shot and otter. And incidental damage. I did find sargassum on the A. Let's say trash removed. Any other damage on the reef? Any other comments? This was fun. And then submit. Right. So after I've submitted, then it goes to this little tiny URL, reef check dive log, reef dive log, and then you can look at your data. I just reported one on here, and this will refresh at some point, and you'll see all this data that we've been playing around with here is all in this form now too. So it all gets put into that place, and that's how we, it'll give us the totals and things like that. But number of dives and all that kind of stuff. And this is the same form that they're using on the North Coast. So there's parity between this and the other project. So I'll take that out of there. This is snapshot. So it's fun. The other things I was talking about, there's things in the comments, is marine mammal disturbance. You want to report any marine mammal disturbance, and what a marine mammal disturbance is considered is if you see an otter and it in some way notices you and like dives because it saw you, that's considered a disturbance. So you don't want to come within about 50 feet of an otter when you're diving, or by boat you want to keep about 100 feet away. There's about 5 otters that frequent this site at this time. So and you just avoid them as best you can. I know it's kind of like they're approaching me. Why do they get the right? But that's the deal. They were very sensitive about it in doing the reporting that we don't we self-report. It's not like you're not gonna get in trouble for reporting it, but it's good to report it. If you were out there and one was disturbed, whatever, and did a duck dive, just write it into your reporting. Invasive species. So there's invasive species in Monterey now. There's Sargassum horneri, which is found in Southern California. Very often is found in Long Beach 2003, and it's spread all over Southern California, and it's been spotted in Monterey in June of last year. So we're on the lookout for it. This is the actual specimen that was found in Monterey on breakwater. It was found June 4th, and it was found and removed, but there might be more. We want to look for it. We want to make sure, because if this ever, you think urchins are bad, this is going to be worse, because it'll outcompete the kelp. You'll never get a chance with this stuff, and it's no way to remove it. So we have to watch for it at the first outbreak of this and bring it to their attention so we can stop it in Monterey. Right now, it's mostly south of Santa Barbara. So this is what it looks like up close, this sargassum. It has these little bladders that are round bladders, right? And this is the actual reproductive part right here, is this big seed thing right here. This is the part that makes it reproductive. But these little bladders make it float. So it's a big bush. And the ends of the leaves have this kind of a look to them. It's kind of like a split little serrated edge on the end of the leaves of the sargassum. So that's the single air bladders. There's the reproductive part. There's the young branches. It's all really well spread. So yeah, you can report it right away if you see it. Just let me know, and I'll report it to UCSC about where they can find it. There's another one too that is locally found. It's called Stephanocystis. Used to be called something else before. I forget. They recategorized it, but it has these little bladders too. But they're chain bladders. See how they're little all together, little like I don't know how do you describe that, like little smaller compartments that are round. It's in that, and that's the difference. You can tell they're more like a string of pearls, chain of pearls is how they're describing it here. And where these ones are for sargassum is very different. It has these large ones, but we see a lot of Stephanocystis in Monterey. It's one of the early colonizers, so you'll see it. It has these strange looking leaves on it that kind of start first, and it'll grow up. And we just don't want to have false reportings. People think they see this and report it as sargassum when it's not. And there's another invasive species. It's called Watercipera, Watercipera subtorquata, and it's all over the harbor. If you ever dove Wharf 2, you'll see it there. It's on all the pilings, a lot of the pilings from top to bottom, and it's
for sure.
very photographic. I think I saw one recently. Someone took a picture of a fringe head on that Watercipera, and it looks beautiful. If you ever did the Monterey shootout, the winners are things that are shot on sargassum, on water cypera. So it's like a potato chip kind of thing, but it's a bryozoan. It's a different kind of a organizational structure. Has little zooids that are in a matrix, and they basically reproduce very easily. Any piece of it can act like a tumbleweed and just go along, dropping zooids everywhere. And so it's one of the early colonizers on the reef. And they're very brittle. If you touch it, it breaks off. It will stain your gloves red, or any color on your suit. It will change it to red. It will and it's very breakable, and urchins eat it, which is kind of like, you'd say, well, urchins eat it, that sounds like a good thing, but it's actually a bad thing, because we're getting rid of all the urchins, right? So then this thing will have awesome opportunity to live and to thrive without being eaten. So we want to keep an eye on it and make sure that this early colonizer doesn't just take over the reef, because it grows so quickly and easily, and it's right next to the wharf, which has a lot of it. So diving on the orange and red buoys, so orange is for the trained divers, and the gray is for the untrained divers that come off the boat. You're within the project area. You're not going to be going over. If you're diving on one of these buoys, you're not going to meander off and start going onto the grid and start culling. You'll only work on that buoy, and don't meander over that sand channel and start going into the treatment area also. But we're gonna keep moving them around on the reef as conditions change, as we need to. Basically, the idea is to start with the grid, and then we'll just keep on expanding outward from the grid and taking on more and more area. Have a persistent effort that just keeps spanning over the entire about 60 acres of treatment area. So on the orange buoy, this is what it looks like. So there's the orange buoy comes down. There's an anchor there. There's a 100-meter tape that goes down, and your assignment will look something like 5 to 10 meters east, right? So that's the assignment, 5 to 10 meters east. And these are like imaginary lines, right? So you don't have the grid lines like on the grid. You just have these marks on the tape, and you have to try and go as best you can in that direction, calling all the urchins. You know, you might meander sideways. You could be off 30 degrees, whatever. It could be that way, but that's okay. You just do the best you can. And if your lane next to you is clear, maybe that'll help you to guide you along this imaginary line. Now, Josh had made a good idea, and that was maybe instead of making an imaginary line, you make a real line. Like use your reel, attach it here, and then run out pretty far, run out 100 feet or whatever, drop the reel, and just make it straight. And then you have lines of your own to go between, to guide you as you do your work. And it's a great idea. Whatever can make you go straight. You just don't want to be off, like go out and come back or something. So you're working side by side between the imaginary lines 5 meters apart. And try to maintain your heading as best you can. And if you can go over your imaginary lines, that's okay. You don't feel like you can't, because it's not yours or something. They can't, like, there's no escape, right? So and then when you're done, just come up at the buoy, right? The best way to come back is come back when you're low on air, and don't run out of air, right? You're not keeping watching that, even though you're busy. And send down the line for safety, and want to have air at the surface. You guys know this stuff. So happy and safe diving. You're a big place. You're far from help. Make sure you have positive buoyancy, and use a whistle or wave. There's lots of people that are walking on up and down the beach or on a boat, whatever. Just try to get someone else's attention to help you. Get your buddy on the shore or on a boat if you can, and call 911 or ask someone else. There's lots of people walking the beach that have a phone. Ask them to call them. Tell them where you are. Don't tell them you're at Tankers Reef. They'll never know where that is. Tell them you're at Del Monte Beach, because they'll recognize that one. And you administer the first aid. So where can you legally call urchins in Monterey, right? That's the next question. Well, it's only legal to call an unlimited number of urchins within the Tankers Reef boundary. And you have to keep your license in your immediate possession, right? So if you're diving, that is an exception. You don't have to carry it with you when you're diving, but have it back on shore, have it in your car. or if you're diving from a boat, keep it on the boat. It is not legal to call urchins anywhere else, except for in Casper Cove in Mendocino, which is 6.5 hours away. I don't think you're going to do that. We have an urchin, Lovers 3 urchin experiment. If you're involved in Reef Check, or if you want to contact them, there is an experiment there where they're also culling urchins too. So that's another legal place to do it. But it's really not legal to cull urchins in these marine protected areas at all, because there's no take of invertebrate life. You can take all the fish you want. You just can't take any invertebrates out of these marine protected areas that are the rest of the peninsula. And it's otherwise you're only allowed to take 35 urchins outside of the marine protected areas. That's the law. So if I was here somehow, not outside of a marine protected area, but not in the boundary, I could take 35 urchins, which means I have to remove them from the water. And that's the rule for everywhere else outside of marine protected areas. And basically diving in Monterey, anytime you dip your toe in the water, you're basically in a marine protected area. From here, from this point all the way around to Point Lobos, it's pretty much all MPAs. So the only place really is here. And that's what we learned so far. We don't need to really talk about that so much. More ways to get involved. You can join Reef Check. The Watermen's Alliance is coordinating things on the North Coast. So they have a Facebook page. And if you feel so like, I really love calling urchins, I want to do it in a different place, you can go to the North Coast and do it up in Casper Cove. And this is what I was thinking about for GUE divers and how you guys can help. Because I have other things that I need to do, and I'm hoping that you guys, since you're so skilled at all these things and you have scooters and can get out there, that there's other things that not right now, but like in the future as we go through this, I need help with other things. And basically I need help inspecting and maintaining all this fishing gear that we're doing out there. You know, the fishing gear maintenance ends up taking along a big percentage of time. And right now I'm the only one doing it. So once everyone gets up to speed and stuff, I'm hoping you guys can help me with some of that. And then replacing the grid divider lines too, like those strings that go across those cave lines. Well, the urchins eat it, you know, because it happens is it grows like marine growth on it, like brown algae, and then they like to eat that, and they'll just jump on the line and eat the line, and they'll kill it with their jaws. So those lines are going to have to be inspected and replaced, you know, periodically. We may need to do different materials in the future. So there's that. And then what I like to do too is for the gray buoy, like use scooters and just cruise around out there and find where they're the densest, right? Like a real dense patch of urchins, and just mark it with an SMB, either send an SMB to the surface and come back with a boat and mark it with a GPS, or there's another concept that Josh was talking about where you have the GPS with you and you raise it to the surface and get your point and then lower it back down, and you're basically prospecting, right? You're like you're digging for gold, urchin gold, and you're going around finding the densest patches. And that's where we'll put the gray buoy, and we'll send all the divers on the boat there to basically reduce urchin density in big ways, because urchins are really patchy, right? I mean, I said there's 7 urchins per square meter on the site, but the deviation is hilarious. Sometimes there's like none, and sometimes there's 1,200. So they just vary quite a bit. It's consistently inconsistent is what's going on out there. So prospecting for them would be helpful. And then moving buoys to new locations and setting up the tape reels would be after we get that gray buoy where it is, we have to go down and set that up on the reel, put the hammers down there and maintain a hammer inventory, right? Like there's there's a handful, you know, of hammers down there. People might not return them and take them back to a dive shop or whatever, or give them back, and then we have to take them back out there. So that has to be maintained too, because I think it'd be good to have hammers out there already instead of people bringing their own hammers. It just seems safer to me to not have people on boats and traveling around with hammers. It's better if it was already there and they could just like borrow it and return it. So, and then where there's my first area of importance is the kelp. There's some kelp out there already. I don't want it to die, because that kelp is going to reseed the entire area. So my first priority is actually to go and call the urchins on the high value places. And that's where I could use people that are good at this, that can go and find where the kelp is and go and get all the urchins off the kelp and off from around the kelp. And because you don't want that kelp to die, because it's really hard to start over again. And then if you have a camera, it's good opportunity for you. You're going to see the same place multiple times. So, and there's a grid there to tell you where you are. So you can go to A, whatever, and take a picture of something and then come back in the fall and take the same picture of the same place and document for yourself what happened. You know, by moving all these urchins, did this kelp flourish? Did it get thicker? And you can help to document that by taking like basically your own before and after pictures, because you'll know where you are at both times. Here's some additional information from where you can learn out more about invertebrates and so on. Okay. And this is our partners in the project. Here's our logo, the Giant Kelp Restoration Project, and here's Reef Check. We're kind of this is they're a non-government organization, and they did all the monitoring out there too. But this group right here in the middle, the Ocean Protection Council, Fish and Wildlife, these guys here are the state agencies that are our partners in the effort. And Abalone Company too, which is right there on the wharf. They've been really good with us too. And we do urchinomics. Get Inspires in Southern California. Bradley Photographic, he's right there in Pacific Grove, and he wants to shoot great pictures of this whole thing. So we're excited to get him on board. And this is some of the sponsors. So you kind of know like who's paying for all this, right? So you guys are. Everybody is. It's grassroots funded. It's not we're not beholden to any non-government organization. Sustainable Surf is they're surfers. They wanted to help out. They gave us a bunch of money. And Louise Woolley, who's a reef check diver, gave us a generous donation, and that paid for all reef checks work out there and paid for the grid. We have a GoFundMe site that people donate to. It doesn't take a lot of money to do this sort of thing. It's just a hammer. It costs $6, and I think, someone's got to pay, but I think that, everyone buying their own license and getting the wreck divers getting that class, that's paying for it right there. So, yeah, that's all good. We're in good shape. We're funded. A lot of times projects get started and they're waiting on funding. We're not waiting on funding. We have everything we need to get going. And that's kind of it. There's some additional material. Oh, I want to talk about messaging too. Just when you're talking about this with people, try not to use words like we're killing or we're going to kill them all or something like that, or smashing or crushing. Try to use words like we're suppressing or we're culling, right? Be sensitive to that, because divers understand it, but the general public is going to have second, they're going to be kind of squeamish on us going out and killing creatures in the ocean. So be aware of that, and try if you post or you tell people things in a social environment, try to use softer words for it. Like all of my hammers, they all have pink on them, right? We're trying to like make it more easier, less aggressive if we can. Yeah, and if we don't want things. The other thing we could go really bad too is if people start going into the marine protected areas with a hammer and start doing things there, and then start taking pictures of it and putting it on social media, and Fish and Wildlife is going to see that. And I mean, they don't have a real deep ear, but it'll be brought to their attention, and then they'll have to do something. And what they could do is they could shut it down, and it would someone doing something crazy like that. We have to just be patient, right? And do what we can in a controlled way. That's not going to get us all kicked off the project, right? We're lucky to have this, and so we want to be able to scale this up and not get kicked off. So updates to the program. I have this is for the instructors, but I have a newsletter that I will send to everybody. You're registered. If you register, you will register for this, and I'll send a newsletter with updates to you and any updates to protocols, because with anything like this, it's brand new. It's going to change constantly. I'm basically an inexperienced volunteer. I'm learning how this is going to go, and so there will be changes, and that's the way I will reach out to you through this newsletter, and also on that assignment portal. I could put information there about changes to protocols and things like that. So that's kind of the only way that my first line of communication with you. But that said, we have the website, and any amendments to this kind of project will go into this curriculum folder. But this item number 3, you're not going to have it. This is for instructors, so I didn't need to put that in there. And this is just some specific language that you don't really need to know. This is their criteria for success. Okay, cool. So that's all I got. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So you mentioned the kelp holdfast, and as well as, so there's a previous slide about like where we should only try to call the urchins when they're on rock or sand. So if we see the urchins, like we saw on Saturday, we saw urchins swarming like right on a kelp holdfast. Should we try to call them directly on the holdfast, or like, use a dive knife and move them off onto the sand and get them
Exactly.
there?
Exactly. Get them off the kelp holdfast first before you call them. What I do is I go up to the kelp holdfast and I try to find where they kind of burrow in, and I get a knife and I pop them out of those areas.
Okay.
Or I can do like on this hammer, it's got a pointy end on it, and I can kind of get in there a little bit and get them off the holdfast and get them on the rock around the holdfast is where I kill them. And then I look up and realize, oh, the whole thing's loaded. The whole thing is full of urchins, right? So
Right.
Before you get too happy on the holdfast and removing them, look up and shake the tree. Get them off there. And because what they do is they start on the holdfast, they climb up to the top and they weigh it down. And then they bring it to their buddies, right? And then they all gang tackle it, right? That's how they operate. So if you can, sometimes I'm like swimming up kind of a ways, and get them off of that, shake them all off. And, sometimes I even I get all the snails off, basically you don't want anything to eat your kelp, right? So get it all off of them. Don't smash the snails, but make them start over and get them off the kelp that way. There's sometimes too when they're in these little cracks that are they're in pockets, in these little burrowed pockets, and you're kind of wondering, boy, should I really go after them in there? I think it's okay. I think if you didn't go after them in the pockets, you wouldn't be killing anything because they're mostly in the pockets, probably 90% of them. So you're gonna have to go for it. But just be really careful of not smashing everything out just around the pocket kind of thing.
Yeah,
Good
got
question. Yeah.
And you mentioned, taking pictures. Like, is there sort of a formal way to submit our pictures, or do we just keep copies?
I had this idea of making like a shared Google Drive kind of thing where people could put stuff. We could set something up like that, where you can put things there. Or, I mean, you can always just email them to me, and
Okay.
what I'm doing is kind of keeping a record of it. I have a catalog of them. Send me your good pictures. You don't have to send me things that you wouldn't show somebody. But send me your good pictures. And what I'll do too is I have a media drive that if we have really good stuff, that I will make it available to reporters and magazines and news stations and stuff like that that are looking for stuff because they don't have a camera crew to go underwater, at the Channel 8 News. But we have those pictures. So we just make them available to them there. And that saves them a lot of trouble, and we get good pictures. So I guess the answer is, for now, you can just email them. And if you have any questions or pictures, just send them to keith@g2kr.com. That'd be the way to reach that. There's all the links that I sent to you. Let me see. They're all on a single place. I'm going to share my screen again. And it will be, shoot. Go back. Yeah, I'm not doing it right. It's G2KR link. There it is. So if you go to this site, G2KR link, you can also get to this, go to the website, g2kr.com. And then it shows you all the links that we talked about today and the required documents and everything like that. I'll send you all guys waiver, stuff like that. but this is where all the links are, and you can just click on them and go into those assignments. There's some shortcut names that you can use as well.
So Keith,
Yes.
what are the next steps? Like we sign the waiver and then we have to meet you for a dive, so you could show us how it's done, right?
Yeah, so let's look at it right here. So this is kind of going back to at the beginning. So we've done this. We're asking questions now. We're getting through here. Some of you got your fishing license, or you need to get a fishing license.
Yeah, I think
Get it
I
right
just got
here.
mine yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
And then register for the g2kr.com. There's that link there for it. It's registration right here. One-time volunteer diver registration. You'll just go on that and go in. It takes about 3 minutes. You'll do that.
So this is different from the one we already registered for volunteering.
No, I think many of you already did. It's the same one. It's the same one.
Okay, so we don't have to do that.
You don't have to do that. If you haven't done it already, then you would need to do it. But
Okay.
yes, yeah. Don't do it twice. You'll just confuse me if you do it twice, because I'll be
right.
like,
Yeah.
because I have 200 names and it's hard for me to tell who's already done it.
Yeah.
So there's that way. There's
I
an
think
online.
I think everybody here has already done it.
Oh, great, perfect. So we all saved 3 minutes. Perfect. Then there's an online quiz. I'll email you a link to it. And basically, the online quiz is just so that I can tell how this material is landing with people. You know, if we're getting the main points across in the presentation. So if you can help me with that, it's about I think it's 20 questions, 25 questions, and I'll send you that link to that. You can take it there, and then I'll send you a waiver too. If you could take the waiver and either send a picture of it, you can take a picture of the second page if you like. Email that to me, and then that'll be it. And then we'll plan a dive, and that will take some logistics to coordinate that. But just let me know when you're going out there, and I'll see if I can be with you. I'm out there. Basically, well, this week's a little exceptional, but usually I'm out there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm out on the place. So if you're there for the weekend, then we definitely can meet up there. And I just basically, I mean, you guys know how to do it, but you know, I just want to make sure everyone's doing it in the right way, and that if there's some errors or something, we can correct it early, and not I kind of need to stay on top of it.
Right.
And that's all. We'll just get started. We'll talk about things a little bit at the beginning, and then you'll go and you'll do your normal dive and crushing a bunch of urchins and reporting the data. And I'll be looking at all of that, how you do the assignment, how you report your data, and giving you some feedback, and give me feedback too. If you're confused by the portal and I don't know what something, just let me know, because you're probably not the first. We're all learning this together. So
for sure. So I was a little confused. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. If you go to that if you go to that picture where you actually show the grid and the two divers looking to start the assignment, yeah, that one,
like this one here, these guys here.
Yeah, when they start. So now if you get a lane number and you have to go east, if you look at the right by where it says shore, there's a north, south, east, west.
Yes. Compass rose
marking. Yeah. So that. So if you were to start east, would you actually line yourself up? Okay, west to east. Right. So
yeah, I think this kind of describes it better, right? So here's the two divers, and they're on the F east. So they're on the east side of this tape, right? Between the tape and the yellow cave line. And that's that's the lane they're in.
Even though you're going north to south, you call that east because
no, it's east because you're on the east side of F. So there's F, right? F has two parts. You could have the west or the east.
I see.
Yeah. I see. That's a good question. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because
because you're headed south, right? You're headed towards shore.
You're headed south. Exactly. Yeah.
You're headed south. Yeah. And on the buoys, it kind of behaves a different way, right? Because then you're going east is actually your heading, right? On the buoys, you're going
Right.
east or west on headings.
Oh yeah, on the
So
orange buoy, you're actually heading east. That's correct. Yeah, you're heading from west to east. Correct. Yeah,
yeah, like here,
towards the
like
grid.
like here you could go, yeah, east towards the grid, right? Or
Yeah.
west, right? So that's it's kind of it's I'm using the same words, but they mean different things here when they're on a
Yeah.
buoy or on
Yeah.
the grid, right? So
Uh-huh.
yeah, good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that could confuse people a little bit because they're heading north to south, but they're on the west of F, where it
Right.
says F. They're east of F,
Right.
or west of F. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll have to look at see the way I can clarify that, or maybe I can just emphasize that point to people too. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
And then how far is the grid? Let's say we start on the orange buoy because that's your high value target, right? You're trying to get all the urchins off the kelp so we could preserve the kelp.
Yeah.
How far is the grid, like the A tape? How far is it from the orange buoy?
Oh, not very far at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, if I were to show it here, like this is where the grid is. The orange buoy is sitting right out here. I don't know if you can see where my
Okay.
cursor is. Orange is over here, and the gray is sitting over here.
Okay.
They're kind of proximate to each other right now. But as things progress, the orange buoy is going to move along. We're gonna have all the divers go down there and have them going in the west direction, and then they'll call a bunch, and then we'll move the whole thing over again, and then we'll send them out and have them go west again, and we'll just keep on, pressing outward from that,
And you want us to work on the orange first, right? From what I understand.
Yeah, for the orange buoy for you guys because there's some kelp there. Basically, I'm not. I don't have a good drawing of it here, but in this area, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. This is where the cable grid is. There's healthy kelp all over here on the north side of it. There's a big healthy kelp bed, and I want to preserve that. I don't want it to die. There's otters that are in it, and they're foraging in it. But this is kind of a high value area to me because the normal swell is this direction from the northwest. So if we can keep this alive and reproductive, then all of this kelp will just populate this area, right? It'll populate our grid. So
makes sense. Yeah.
even though for the authorities they want us to clear the grid, first things first, the kelp. The kelp is first.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So
So
So when
what
you want to get an
happens?
assignment, just go on the assignment there. But you know, the assignments are like up for the grid right now. So when you want an assignment, you can just email me. How's that? Just email me and say I need an orange assignment, and we'll make sure you get an orange one. Over there. And right now the orange buoy, I just set it there. There's no tape measure on it. So like this weekend, I'll go and pull a tape measure on it, and then it'll make sense to people. I'll put a tape measure on the gray and the orange buoys. But it's been we had some problems with the wreck divers getting out there, and everything's kind of slow because we had problems with the boats, and they want us to have commercial fishing licenses to put a dive charter boat, putting wreck divers in the water. It's all crazy. It's all just crazy.
The other question I had was, so when you start on the orange buoy from the tape measure, what happens when you hit the cable grid? Do you turn back?
Yeah, don't go on the cable grid.
Okay, so you turn back.
Yeah, because then the cable grid kind of becomes an exclusion area, basically. Right. Yeah, you don't, because then you'd be putting effort that's undocumented. They want to document the effort on the cable grid. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Yeah. But yeah, basically the other side of the sand channel and the cable grid becomes an exclusion area if you're on the orange buoys or orange or gray buoys.
Okay.
Good.
And then so is the cable grid only so when do you expect us to work on the cable grid, or is it cable grid exclusively for scientific divers?
Oh, it's not for scientific divers, but it'll be next. I want to. First thing is I want to protect the kelp. right? And there's
Okay.
kelp on the
Yeah,
cable
of
grid.
course.
There's kelp
Uh-huh.
there, and I think I've
Oh
been
yeah.
going around trying to get it over there. But all that kelp that's kind of around there, I think is a high priority. And it may be that we kind of mix it up a little bit. Like you guys are working on the orange buoy, saving the protecting the kelp, and then we have new divers that are coming into the program, and they go on the cable grid, and then we have divers that are coming in off the boats. They've never done this
Mhm.
before. They're untrained. They can go on the gray. And there's room for everybody.
Right.
To be doing this kind of thing. So, but
Right.
it's up to me to manage this in a way
Uh-huh.
that has a strategy for the urchin,
Sure.
suppression, over the area. And that's going to be interesting to do. But it's basically the idea is you're just going to be persistent. We'll start on the grid and we'll clear the grid and we'll move out and then we'll start back over at the grid again and we'll do it
Uh-huh.
again and just keep reducing it with multiple passes and just keep pushing out in a large and sustained effort emanating from basically ground zero is that cable grid, and we'll just keep moving outward from there. Yeah, like it's really inconsistent. There's some sections like over here there's no urchins. I don't know why, but there's no urchins here.
Uh-huh.
But there's lots of it here. I don't know. There's all kinds of strange stuff. There's anchors
Yeah.
out there, old tankers and
Yeah.
stuff that were out in the site. So, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's really inconsistent.
Yeah, I think that's what me and Nick saw. It was kind of scattered all over the place. It wasn't just uniform.
Yeah, yeah. And Josh Hona Mitchell did a survey, and he went out here. He started. I think he came here, and he went but he kind of went this way along like where the sand meets, kind of like in this area. And this is before COVID, right? So it was 2019, and there was all kinds of kelp out there. In the survey he
Uh-huh.
did, he had a camera looking down, and it was kelp the whole time. So it's really changed a lot. Now there's just a little bit of kelp, and the kelp you'll see is not looking very good. It's not like the kelp you see at the breakwater or something that's really big and has all these stipes on it. It's kind of
Uh-huh.
scraggly looking. It's kind of like it's like 10 stipes. It's not really robust.
Yeah,
So
the kelp that we saw was like, barely hanging on there.
yeah, it's kind of anemic looking. You're like, this is not good kelp. And so, yeah, hopefully, we can get it to flourish. And basically, on the bottom of a kelp plant is where its reproductive fronds are. They're all at the bottom, right? And once it gets a lot of that going, then it has primary production, and then it can put spores out over about a 500 to 1,000 foot range. I think it's like more like I think it's exaggerating. I think it's like 250 feet or something. It doesn't go very far, um, because the all the spores are at the bottom of the plant, right? So they just have to go in the current, washing around right there. How far can the current take it? Where like a bull kelp as reproduction at the top, right? So it puts its spores in the water and they go like all over the coast. So that's why there's a lot. You'll find that bull kelp is a really fast and early colonizer on these sites that grow there. So
Yeah, I had one more question.
mhm,
I was reading about some of the efforts that was done in Southern California.
mhm,
What I read was they basically cut the healthy part of the kelp, the blades where
mhm.
the seeds are, and they
Yeah.
put it in a sporophyll mesh bag about a meter
Yeah.
off the substrate. And
Mhm,
after the urchin pattern was cleared,
mhm.
and they just let it scatter all around. I mean, is that something that's
That's a possibility. Actually, very much a possibility. There are there's lots more going on than just the urchin thing. We're
yeah?
doing drone survey. We're doing underwater robotics survey of the grid too. We're doing kelp outplanting out in this area over here. There's a researcher from UC Santa Cruz. She's doing her doctoral thesis on kelp, two different species of giant kelp. They're going to try it
Uh-huh.
out over here. We have this idea of doing that kelp bag thing too on these concrete
Oh, nice.
cylinders that are going to be out somewhere over here somewhere. We have 28 cylinders. We'll be putting them out there. Um, there is an experiment from Moss Landing where they're going to do green gravel.
Uh-huh.
Basically, it's small kelps growing on little gravels, and then they spread them out on the bottom, and hopefully they grow, kind of
Oh,
thing. So
nice.
there'll be that going on too, and that's also that kind of outplanting idea is also happening at the other project that's at Lovers
Uh-huh.
Point. That's a reef check project too. So there's definitely lots of interest in kelp outplanting. There's interest in um, taking the urchins out and ranching them and fattening
Uh-huh.
them up for food. So, I mean, there's lots of things, other things going on that will
Uh-huh.
benefit from this too. And kelp outplanting is definitely one of them. It's hard to do. You know, they did it in Southern California, like you said, and they put little bags, burlap bags, and swam around with sporophytes and stuff, and it took 7 years
Mm.
for it to work.
Uh-huh.
And basically, what happened was they didn't have kelp at all, and they had to go 20 miles to get kelp that they thought would work, right? And then they grew it in the classrooms, and all these kids started growing kelp in their classrooms, and they brought it out, and they swam around with these sporophytes, and they put them in the water. They tried this, they tried that, they tried all these different ways, and the kelp grew up, but it didn't reach the surface. It stopped about 5 feet short of the surface. They couldn't figure out why, but it was because the oceanographic conditions weren't suited for it. It wasn't a lot
All
of
right.
nutrients, right? So it didn't reach the surface. But then it did reach the surface, and then everyone was so happy. And then that winter, the storms took it and put it on the beach. And then Nancy Caruso, who did that project, she got sued by Laguna Beach because she had made kelp, and it was stinky and full of flies and on the beach where there was never kelp before, and they wanted her to clean it up. So
Okay.
you see what the problem is, right? Like, don't let the kelp die. Like, people will forget,
Yeah.
and then when you bring it back, they'll sue you for it, right? So that's the lesson learned from that.
Yeah, maybe that's not a good option.
Not a good option. And then it's not like the kelp that will grow best here is already here, right?
That's
If you
right.
put
Yeah.
kelp 20 years, 20 miles away, and you bring it here, well, that was in a different set of conditions, you know. Maybe it's warmer
Right.
there or whatever. You know,
Uh-huh.
you want the kelp that has a history of living here to be here. That's
Makes
the best
sense.
chance.
Yeah.
You don't want
Yeah.
a genetic bottleneck, you know. They had that in Palos
Yeah.
Verdes where they reduced it so much, and then they were like, why does all the kelp only have 3 stipes on it? You know? Like that was a problem because it was genetic bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Makes
that's
sense. Yeah.
cautionary tale of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Anyone else have any questions?
Not a question, just one quick suggestion you might want to make for safety purposes. It's a good idea to, at least I thought, to have a marker buoy up when you're swimming or scootering on the surface, just because there is like kayak and small boat traffic around there and you're not very visible.
Yeah, I think that's what you guys were doing coming back. You had an SMB and the fireboat was being stupid out there. Yeah, don't trust anybody, you know. Have an SMB if you're going along. I have a hard time pulling an SMB through kelp. Would be the only thing, but right now it's kind of not a lot of kelp, so it might be easier.
Yeah,
But
just when
eventually
you're like
to do.
going on the surface, like not really going
Yeah.
through the forest, but just kind of transiting back and forth.
Yeah. What I was doing was actually I had like a crab pot buoy and I would tow it behind myself, right? So it makes me be like I'm like 50 feet long, right? I'm in the water this whole thing here. Yeah, make yourself as visible as possible. It's a good idea.
So there was this one slide where you showed how far does it take to swim from the beach. It was 1,300 feet. How long does it take for a recreational diver to swim on surface? Like, what is a typical medium speed?
Yeah,
Is it like
That's 10 or 15 minutes.
that's about 15 minute.
15
cruise
minutes?
out.
Okay.
Yeah, about 15 minutes on the surface to do that. You know, in all of our registration, we asked people how they intend to get there, and 90% of the people said they wanted to do it